Hello everybody, and welcome once again to Quick Trivia with Mike, the weekly quiz show right here on channel 955, where we test your knowledge of obscure but really fun trivia. We hope you're having a good time with it. We know we are. Scott and I have been putting on these shows for you now for 22 weeks. That's 66 trivia questions, but we got a lot more in our bag of tricks yet, so hopefully we can keep you entertained for weeks and months to come. Before I get into this week's show, I want to especially thank Susan Sinzak over in 3307 of the Contemporary. If you remember, I asked you last week, or I complained rather, I just haven't figured out a way to wear a mask and not fog up my glasses. And given the fact that I really need my glasses, and I've been walking around with a face mask and no glasses, could have been getting kind of dangerous. So I asked if anybody had any tips. Susan actually sent me a link to an article that was in the Washington Post about how to do it. I could read you 2 or 3 pages from the article, but the bottom line is, keep the mask as tight as you can at the top. That prevents air from escaping through the top and fogging up your glasses. So thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. I'm going to try that method out and see how it works. Now let's get into this week's show. You know that we begin by revealing the answers to 3 questions from last week. Then we go off and we give you 3 new questions for the coming week. Let's get right into the questions from last week, shall we? We talked a little bit about horse racing's Triple Crown. The fact that the Kentucky Derby began in 1875 and the Triple Crown has been going on ever since. Winning all 3 legs of the Triple Crown is really a remarkable feat, specifically because the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont are all specifically set up to demonstrate different skills in horses. The shortest of the 3 is the Kentucky Derby, and a sprinter is typically the horse that will win that race. The last leg of the Triple Crown is the longest, and the horse with the greatest power and endurance typically wins that. I pointed out to you last week that there are several sports scholars who think that the greatest athlete of all time may very well be Secretariat, the Triple Crown winner from 1973. Secretariat won all 3 legs of the Triple Crown and to this day holds the record for the fastest time in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. So Secretariat was the fastest sprinter and the horse with the greatest power and endurance. Quite a remarkable feat, as you can imagine. It'd be like a speed skater winning the 500 meter and the 10,000 meter in the same series of events in an Olympics. Most people think that the greatest athlete of all time would be a human, and that's why it's somewhat controversial. Our question to you last week, however, was, there have been 12 or 13 winners of the Triple Crown since the very first in 1919, Sir Barton. The most recent was Justify in 2018. There is, however, only one horse that has finished second in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. Ironically, that horse finished second to a Triple Crown winner. The same horse won all 3 legs of the Triple Crown that year, and a horse finished second, the only horse in the history of the Triple Crown to win all 3 legs, or to finish second in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. Who was that horse? It was Aladar. Aladar finished second to Affirmid in 1978. So there you have it, a remarkable achievement in sports history in the Triple Crown. Aladar finished second to Affirmid in all 3 legs of the Triple Crown. Next, we talked to you a little bit about a historical figure, a gentleman who was very well noted in his time. Born in 1817, died in 1862, Henry David Thoreau. He was a noted essayist, poet, and philosopher. Most of you know him because he went off and sequestered himself for over 2 years in the woods around Walden Pond, trying to commute with nature, see if he could determine more about his inner self and how man interacts with nature, how nature interacts with the greater world around it. Is there a synergy, and how do we play into it? All of that leading into his theories of transcendentalism. He also was a leading abolitionist in that era, a big supporter of John Brown. And as you know, there was one of the, in fact, it was the major issue defining history and ethics and culture and morality leading up to the commencement of the Civil War in 1861. Henry David Thoreau staked out his position on that issue, and he was against slavery. On Walden Pond, he had a very famous saying, "Time is but a stream." And I ask you how that saying finishes. Here it is. "Time is but a stream, I go a-fishing in." That's the answer to question number 2, I go a-fishing in. To this day, people question what he really meant by that. But some of the leading scholars on Henry David Thoreau think that what he meant was that we need to be flexible in our life. As we move on in our life, we need to adapt to the changes that take place. We need to be able to fish in many places on the stream. In early life, we might be focused on fun, and then it's career, and then it's family. And maybe we have thoughts about our feelings on philosophy and politics. Time is but a stream, I go a-fishing in. That was the answer to question number 2, a very famous Henry David Thoreau quote. Our third question delved a little bit in Milwaukee history. You know that I like to challenge you a little bit with your knowledge of the very community that we live in. We talked a lot about Milwaukee and World War II, a very long period of time. December 7th, 1941, till August 1945, when the Japanese finally surrendered. It had a dramatic impact on the city of Milwaukee. Its culture, its economy, the family structure, all of that was impacted. Thousands upon thousands. In fact, it was 70,000 men from Milwaukee enlisted. 126 men enlisted in one day after December 7th, 1941. By 1945, 1,900 Milwaukeeans had died in World War II. 70,000 Milwaukee area women and men served in uniform all over the globe. One of Milwaukee's greatest contributions to the war effort, as you know, was the production of weapons and machines. We were, after all, part of the Rust Belt of the country. By war's end, Milwaukee was receiving over $175 million a year in defense contracts, and we were turning out over $1 billion of product to America's war machine annually by the end of the war. This changed Milwaukee dramatically. In fact, by 1944, 25% of Milwaukee's workforce was made up of women. 20% of them had children at home. Ironically, the police force will tell you that this was the very beginning of the juvenile delinquency problem in Milwaukee. It certainly was the commencement of the latchkey issue in Milwaukee. Children at home without parental supervision. As you can imagine, there was the dad in the family off in the war, the mom working in one of Milwaukee's defense factories, the children at home left to their own designs to do as they wish. Many people felt that it was the beginning of the juvenile detention issue, juvenile delinquency issue in Milwaukee. Something happened in April of 1945 to ease the tensions and lift the spirits of this war-weary community. It happened right on the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge, and I asked you, What was that thing that happened? The answer, Gertie the duck. A reporter from the Milwaukee Journal noticed that a duck had hatched 9 eggs, or laid rather, 9 eggs on pilings on the Milwaukee River under the Wisconsin Avenue Bridge. And over a period of 35 days, wrote stories about the duck's efforts to safeguard those 9 eggs and turn them into little ducklings. Ultimately, 6 of those 9 eggs did hatch and become ducks. Not only did the Milwaukee Journal write articles, but the Milwaukee Sentinel, which was a separate publication in those days, ran daily photographs. Life magazine, the largest national publication at that time, ran a serial ran a front page story on Gertie the duck. The Daily Express from the United Kingdom picked it up. As you can imagine, England was pretty weary from the war as well. Reader's Digest ran a story entitled "The Duck That Made Milwaukee Famous." So the answer to question number 3 was Gertie the duck. We had several people call in or write in with answers this past week. First of all, I'd really like to thank and welcome back Jim Fry and Augie Moriano. They were participants in Quick Trivia with Mike many weeks ago, and we haven't heard from them in a little while, but both of them got in this week. And I thank them for rejoining and having fun with this. I hope sometime some of you will start sending in answers as well. You'll notice that at the beginning of the show and at the end of the show, we have bumper music. The tiebreaker for this show, if 2 or more people get the correct number of answers correct, is that bumper music. This past week, that bumper music was the Rockford Files, the very popular detective series that ran on television in the 70s and the 80s, starring James Garner. The music was actually written by Mike Post, who did many television theme songs at that time. The Rockford Files served as our bumper music and was the tiebreaker this week. And frankly, we needed it. We had several people that got all 3 questions correct. Augie got the wrong bumper music. The Hills were unable to identify the bumper music. Both of them got all 3 questions correct, however. Ironically, Jim Fry got the bumper music right, but he missed one of the questions. The only one who got all 3 questions correct and identified the bumper music was Teresa Sundberg. Congratulations, Teresa, and welcome back to the winner's circle. Your picture is going to be on 955 for the next week, heralding you as the weekly winner of Quick Trivia with Mike. Let's move on to this week's trivia questions, shall we? Let's get back to World War II. There was a division of British government that was very heavily into research and development. It was called MD1. It stood for Military Defense 1. It was known by the moniker of Churchill's Toy Shop. The goal was to create super weapons that would give the Allies an edge in their war against the Axis. Ironically, the British government didn't see the logic of research and development into new war weapons. Churchill, in his role as Prime Minister, bypassed all the red tape and just set up MD1 on his own. He did so in 1939, shortly after the invasion of Poland by the Germans. One of the most famous inventions coming out of MD1 was the limpet mine, and that was the first of 50 weapons that came out. The limpet mine actually was remarkable in that these scientists and engineers created a sticky bomb, if you will, that scuba divers could attach to the underside of vessels. That was a remarkable thing in and of itself. But then they went beyond that. They created a timed, delayed fuse so that the scuba diver would have time to vacate the area of impact. Quite a remarkable achievement given the fact that this was all done underwater. Another remarkable thing about the scientists at MD1 is that they used really novel, generally well-known items to create some of these things. For example, some of their sticky bombs used socks covered in sticky flypaper, and that became the mechanism that attached them to the underside of carriages. Condoms were used to prevent waterproofing for bombs, or for the fuses. Aniseed balls, a very common hard candy of children in Great Britain at that time, was the original inspiration for the scientists coming up with the delayed fuse. They figured if a candy could figure out how to disperse its flavor over a period of time in a wet surface, the saliva of your mouth, why couldn't we figure out a way to come up with a way to delay the release of a fuse? So many of the items that are common in everyday usage gave these remarkable scientists and engineers the inspiration for their work. Ironically, a very, very well-known literary figure, both from books and movies, is said to have been patterned after MD1, Churchill's toy shop. You know this person very, very well. In fact, the most famous actor who played this person was Desmond Llewellyn. It has also been portrayed by John Cleese. Currently, the actor portraying this person is Ben Whishaw. 3 others have also done so in lesser-known movies. Who is this literary character in novels and in movies that is patterned after Churchill's toy shop? Played by Desmond Llewellyn, John Cleese, and many other actors. Our second question delves a little bit into the fact that today is opening day in baseball for the Milwaukee Brewers at Miller Park. There's going to be a game later today. I know there's going to be no fans in the stands, but baseball's back. Let's get a little bit into baseball trivia, but we're going to go a little bit south. We're going to talk about the Wrigley's and Chicago baseball, if you will. Wrigley actually was the children of immigrants, and he was a true entrepreneur. It was selling soap that got his start, but he really believed in giving his buyers a little bit of an incentive. So if you bought soap from Wrigley, he gave you a little bit of baking powder as a bonus. Ultimately, he found out that people were buying his soap to get the baking powder. They loved the baking powder more than the soap. He decided he would give up on the soap and just sell the baking powder. But he loved the idea of this bonus. Buy my product and you get a little something else as an incentive. He gave away sticks of gum as an incentive to buy his baking powder. Ultimately, shrewd man that he was, he found out that people were buying the baking powder just to get his gum. He gave up on the baking powder. He focused exclusively on gum, naming it Wrigley's Gum, of course. It made his name and his fortune. Now, we all know the Wrigley's because of Wrigley Field and baseball in Chicago and stuff like that. But that's not actually where he's most famous. Nationally, it's because of his work on Catalina Island. He's very closely connected with that. It's an island off the shore of Los Angeles that's become a vacation destination for people worldwide. Through his intercession, steamships started coming, hotels were built, casinos were built, trees and shrubs and flowers were planted throughout the island, and it's a vacation paradise today. And he might actually be more known for his work at Catalina Island. Also, his work with chewing gum kind of lends itself to the work of somebody else. A gentleman by the name of Walter Deemer actually invented the chewing gum that Wrigley started to call his own, and Walter Deemer is the one who gave chewing gum its distinctive flavor. When he created the chewing gum, it had a dull gray color to it, and he knew that children were the ones who primarily ate chewing gum, or chewed chewing gum. He thought a brighter color might spruce it up. All he had available to him at that time was red dye. That's all he had in his warehouse at the time. He watered it down a little bit, creating the color of pink, and voila! You've got the color that made bubblegum famous, pink. Kind of interesting how trivia lends itself to bigger stories and makes shows like this possible. Let's get back to talking about the Wrigley's and Chicago. Let's talk about Wrigley Field for a while. It originally was called Wigman Park, and it was named after the owner of Wigman Park, who was also the owner of a ball team, a professional ball team that played there at the time. Wrigley Field, opening as Wigman Park, opened in 1914 at a 14,000 fan capacity. In 1919, it was renamed Cubs Park, and in 1927, it finally got the name that we know it of as today, Wrigley Field. I told you that a professional ball team owned by somebody else actually started playing, Mr. Wigman started playing its games there in 1914 when it opened. The Cubs actually didn't start playing there until 1916. That's today's second trivia. There are 5 names of professional sports teams that have played at Wrigley Field since it opened in 1914. 5 professional sports teams have called it home. What are those 5 professional sports teams that have called Wrigley Field home? Now, I want to caution you. There's a little bit of a trick question. You now know part of the trick question. It originally was known as Wigman Park. I'm going back to that era. In addition to that, one of the professional sports teams changed its name. So there are 5 names, but only 4 teams that have played at Wrigley Field. What are those 5 names and 4 teams that have called Wrigley Field home since it was built in 1914? Our third question gets back a little bit to Milwaukee trivia. You know I love to do that. Today we're going to be talking about the Cudahy family. 3 generations of the Cudahy family. Patrick and Anna M. Cudahy started the meatpacking plant, which actually bears the name and has been the beginning of everything that made them famous. Ironically, Patrick and Anna M. Cudahy acquired the meatpacking plant with their brother John from one of the Plankingtons, also of Milwaukee fame. After acquiring the meatpacking plant, of which they originally were just employees, then became partners, Patrick and John, they eventually moved the meatpacking plant to the town of Lake. Lake now incorporates portions of Bayview, St. Francis, and what has become known as Cudahy, that bears the name of the Cudahy family. There have been 2 other generations of the Cudahy family that have become extremely famous. And ironically, unlike a lot of these patriarchal families in American history, these 3 generations all became known for something separate. We're going to go off to the 3rd generation first. Michael Cudahy. You all know that he's the grandson of Patrick and Anna M. Cudahy. He started his own company, Marquette Electronics. He probably is best known for his Marquette Electronics, but he is equally known for his philanthropy. If you have any knowledge of Discovery World right here in Milwaukee, you have to thank Michael Cudahy. It was his inspiration and his impetus and his charitable contributions that made Discovery World possible. And he's noted for many other things around the Milwaukee area as well. What made Marquette Electronics famous? How did Michael Cudahy become so wealthy because of Marquette Electronics? Well, one of the most important things was the invention of the electrocardiograph. It's now known and used in hospitals throughout the world. And that was done right here under the tutelage of Michael Cudahy at Marquette Electronics. Let's go to his father, John Cudahy, and the son of Patrick and Anna. John was actually born in 1887, lived until 1943. Again, he was the son of Patrick and Anna. He graduated Harvard in 1910 and UW Law in 1913. He served in the United States Army in World War I and actually became a hero because after the armistice was signed in 1918, he led a counteroffensive in northern Russia, freeing over 600 American soldiers that had been surrounded by an army of Bolsheviks in the early stages of the Russian Revolution. So he's actually a war hero in its own right. After the war, he came back to the Milwaukee area and joined the Cudahy firm, but in their real estate business. Cudahy Towers was built under his auspices right here on the lakefront of Milwaukee, still exists today and known as one of Milwaukee's most wonderful buildings. And he really made his name because of that. He died in 1943 on his estate just off of 92nd and Brown Deer. That estate ultimately was donated to the YMCA, and it became an art YMCA versus a recreation one. Kind of an innovative thing, and that was because of the insistence of the Cudahy family, and of course the philanthropy of Michael Cudahy. However, John Cudahy is also known because leading up to World War II, he served as America's representative to several European nations. Starting in 1933, he served as envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary to a European nation. It was during that time that, under the auspices of Life magazine, he actually interviewed Adolf Hitler. What European country did John Cudahy serve as the envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary beginning in 1933? That's your third question today. There you have it, folks. Those are our 3 questions for the day. A little bit of Milwaukee trivia, as you know I always like. We went back a little bit into World War II, some historical trivia. So a little bit of a variety, hopefully to keep you all interested. Get your answers to me by Monday at noon. Maybe you can be the Teresa Sundberg of this week and get your picture up on channel 955 with me as the winner of trivia for this week. You can get your answers to me on email, mbriever@eastcastleplace.com, calling me at my office, 963-8425, putting the answers in my mailbox behind the concierge desk at the main entrance, or just slipping the answers under my door. Any one of those ways will get me the answers by noon on Monday, and you could be the grand champion for the coming week. Get in the winner's circle, folks, and get those answers into me. As always, I'd like to thank the management of ECTV, the president of ECTV, Tyler Gudex, our general manager, Laura Wengler, my producer, Scott McFerrin, and my artistic director, Cooper Ledvina. I'd like to pay special tribute this week to Scott McFerrin and Cooper Ledvina. Both of them lent extensive research and background information to some of the questions that I asked today. So thanks very much to Scott and Cooper. You never get to see them on this show, but they're behind the scenes and they're making as successful as it is. Well, there you have it. I ask you folks to please stay smart, stay safe, and be patient. We will open up again completely and enjoy that wonderful East Castle Place hospitality. Until next week, I'm your host, Mike Briever. This is Quick Trivia with Mike. So long, everybody.